Hello and greetings to everyone. Today we will continue with 3I, which is factors. We are going to see how to get the factors of any given number. Before we start, we know that the number, if you take for example the number 20, we know we can express 20 as 2 times 10. Also, we can express 20 as 4 times 5. In the first product here, the numbers 2 and 10, they are factors of number 20. If we divide the number 20 by 2, it gives us 10, which is a whole number. If we divide the number 20 by 10, it gives us 2, which is a whole number. The same thing here, if we divide the number 20 by 4, it gives us 5, which is a whole number. If we divide the number 20 by 5, it gives us 4, which is a whole number. You see that all the remainders, when we perform the division by 2, by 10, by 4, or by 5, the remainders will be 0. So these numbers, they are said to be the factors of the number 20. Now, what is a factor? When we talk of the factors of a number, we are simply referring to those numbers, whole numbers, that will divide the given number without any remainder. Let's write it down. The factors of a number n, denoted, where this our n is a whole number, denoted as, this is how we denote the factors of the number n, as f of n or d of n is a set of whole numbers, that would divide the number n without any remainder. You can see here the numbers 2, 4, 5, and 10. We will divide the number 20 without any remainder. Now let's write this down. If the number n can be expressed as a product of some whole numbers, let's assume the whole numbers s, t, u, and v, that is, the number n is equal to s times t times u times v then the numbers s, t, u, and v are factors of the number, and they are factors of the number n. Now let's note the following. Very important. The first one, the number 1 is a factor. Number 1 is a factor of every number. Take for example, if you divide the number 20 by 1, it gives us 20, which is a whole number. The remainder is 0. If you divide any number by 1, it gives you that number, and the remainder is 0. So 1 is a factor of every number. Next, a number is a factor of itself. Looking at this our example here, take for example 20. If you divide 20 by 20, it gives us 1, which is a whole number. That means 20 is a factor of itself. Next hyphen, a number has both positive and negative factors. Most often we limit ourselves to the positive factors, but any number has both positive and negative factors. For example, if t, let's assume t is a factor of the number n, then negative t is also a factor of the number n. Looking at this our example, still working with 20, we know 4 is a factor of 20. If we divide 20 by negative 4, it will simply be equal to negative 5, which is a whole number. Therefore, negative 4 is a factor of 20. We write down, this is still a continuation of the third hyphen, we write down the factors as, take note of this, write it down as plus or minus t. It means positive t is a factor of n and negative t is a factor of n, meaning n has factors t and negative t. So you take note of this. It's very important. Most often, we always give only the positive factors and we tend to ignore the negative factors. Next hyphen, when writing when writing the factors of a number, factors of a number n, the first factor is, take note of this, is plus or minus 1. Simply means positive 1 is a factor of n, negative 1 is a factor of n, and the last factor is plus or minus n. It simply means positive n is a factor of n, negative n is a factor of n. Take for example, if you divide n by negative n, this will simply be equal to negative 1, which is a whole number. If you divide n by positive n, this will simply be equal to 1, which is a whole number. If you divide n by negative 1, it gives negative n, which is a whole number. If you divide n by 1, it gives us n, which is a whole number. So you take note of that. Next hyphen, take note of this. Another name for factor is divisor. So when you see divisor, it's another name for factor. I'll underline it. It's very important. Now let's take example. It goes, write down the factors of the following. We have A 6, B we have 9, C we have 16, and lastly D we have 20. Let's take down solution. For A we have the number 6. We have to write out the factors of the number 6. So this will simply be equal to, it is a set, so we have to open our left curly bracket. We know that the first factor is plus or minus 1. So write down plus or minus 1. The next, we know if we divide 6 by 2, we are going to obtain 3. So plus or minus 2 is a factor. If we divide 6 by negative 2, it gives negative 3, which is a whole number. The next factor is plus or minus 3. And the last factor is plus or minus 6, the number itself. This set is the same as writing it this way. We start from the smallest factor to the biggest. We know negative 6 is the smallest, so negative 6 is a factor. -3 is a factor. You start writing the negative factors from the last factor to the first. Then you write down the positive factors from the first to the last. Then -3, -2, we move now to -1. Now for the positive factors, we have 1, 2, 3, and lastly 6. These are the factors of the number 6. We underline the result. We go now to question B. For question B, we have to write down the factors of the number 9. This is denoted as f of 9. This is set. This will simply be equal to, the first one will be plus or minus 1. The next factor, if you go to 2, if you divide 9 by 2, it leaves a remainder. If you divide 9 by 3, it gives us a whole number. So the next factor will be plus or minus 3. If you go to 4, you divide 9 by 4, there will be a remainder. If you go to 5, you divide 9 by 5, there will be a remainder. If you divide 9 by 6, there will be a remainder. If you divide 9 by 7, there will be a remainder. By 8, there will be a remainder. If you divide 9 by 9, it gives you a whole number of 1. So the next factor will be plus or minus 9. Now this will simply be equal to, we write out the factors from the smallest to the biggest. When writing down the negative factors, we start from the last one, -9. From -9, we move to the next one, -3. From -3, we move to -1. Then we write down the positive factors, starting from the first one, 1, 3, 9. These are the factors of 9. We go now to question C. Question C says we should write down the factors of the number 16. We need f of 16. This will simply be equal to, for the first factor, we have plus or minus 1. The next, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8, and lastly plus or minus 16. So this will simply be equal to -16, -8, -4, -2, -1, 1, 2, 4, 8, and lastly 16. These are the factors. So you always give the positive and negative factors. You should not limit yourself only to the positive factors. We go now to D. We have 20. F of 20 will simply be equal to, we have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10, and lastly plus or minus 20. So this will simply be equal to, write out the negative factors first. Start from -20, -10, -5, -4, -2, -1, 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and lastly 20. We are done with the factors of 20. Now let's end by taking down this exercise for application. Rules. Write down the factors of the following. A, we have 7. For B, we have 10. For C, we have 25. For D, we have 30. For E, we have 50. And lastly for f, we have 125. We are going to end here, and in our next video we are going to start by correcting this exercise for application before we treat prime numbers and prime factorization of numbers. Like the video, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching.